A few years ago, with some help from the family, I built this small shed, and it was an easy job because the building was lightweight and it rested on concrete block piers. It didn't need a continuous foundation. But if I'm building a stone studio, I'm going to need a continuous foundation, and it has to be pretty sturdy to hold up all those rocks. And if you don't have a continuous foundation, you can get a disaster. Welcome back to my channel, and let me remind you of how we got to where we are now. We started with batter boards, laying out the footprint of the building, dug the trenches for the footings until we got down to stable clay, began pouring the footings on the east side of the building where the boulders are the biggest, and used steel rebar to reinforce the concrete. And the rebar rests on wire chairs that I cut from scrap fencing. I didn't buy them from the store. The point of these chairs is to hold the rebar up off the ground so that the concrete gets under it and helps strengthen the concrete pour. It doesn't do much good if the rebar lies flat on the ground. So I made a lot of these, but it didn't take long. While I was pouring the footings and building the foundation, this stake was my reference point. This is the southeast corner, and the top of it is the top of the foundation. So I laid everything out from that point. Mixed a lot of concrete and finished pouring the footings on March 2nd. To mark the edges of the rockwork, I cut a slot in a piece of cardboard, dropped a plumb bob down from the string lines, and then spray painted into the slot to give me a dashed line along the outside edge of the stonework. These pink rods that you see sticking up are rebar. They're not steel, but they're a new material that's supposed to be stronger than steel, and they'll help reinforce the stone walls as they go up. I started laying stone on the high side, the north side, because I could just roll these giant stones into the ditch, wrestle them into position. They'd be buried mostly when the job was finished, so they wouldn't show. I mix a lot of mortar on this job, dozens of bags of mortar mix. I usually mix about a third of a bag in this red bucket, with water, of course. And I use a DeWalt rotary hammer drill, an SDS-style chuck, and this heavy-duty mixer attachment works really well. You may be wondering why I didn't use a regular cement mixer and bulk materials to do all this. Well, I can't get the bulk materials up the hill in my Gorilla cart. It's easier just to bring them up in bags. What I'm doing here is adjusting the drill from the hammer to the drill. I'd been using the hammer function to drill into rock. It only takes a couple of minutes to get the mortar mixed really well, and then all you have to do is rinse off the mixer. I take my time. I'm really slow at this, but I want to get a good mortar bed, and I want to get a good fit with the stones, so I take the time to trim them, take the time to look around for the stone that's going to fit the best. Now, I've learned a lot from books and from magazine articles and from YouTube videos, and there are a lot of good experts out there on stone masonry. But the one who's helped me the most is Kevin Wilson, who has a channel called Construction Kev, ! And I highly recommend it. I really like his approach to stonework, his care to make the joinery look tight and neat, and it's exactly the kind of style I aspire to, but he's the pro, not me. I have to say that as tedious as this looks, it's very satisfying when you get a stone that beds just right and it seems to fit and belong where you've placed it. When I need to, I trim the stones to make them fit a little better. And I brush them off, make sure they're clean. Helps the mortar hold them in place. This part of the build was tricky because I had to incorporate a giant boulder that you see in the foreground. By April Fool's Day, this is where we were. I had the first row of stones pretty well set on the east side and the north side, and I had dry fit these stones up to the top of the foundation on the southeast corner. I was pretty happy with this fit, so I wound up mortaring it in place. You can see the rebar that establishes the corner and the top of the foundation and the string lines that cross right over it, and that's what helps guide me up to the top of the wall. The walls are 20 inches thick because in addition to 12 inches of stone on the outside, I'm using an 8-inch ledge, mostly of concrete block, to hold up the floor system and to provide backing for the stone part of the foundation. That got complicated on the boulder side of the foundation wall, so I had to go to SketchUp to figure out how to use the concrete blocks around those boulders. But it worked out fine, and I trundled a lot of concrete blocks up the hill in my gorilla cart, 4, 5, or 6 at a time. I set some rebar to connect the cores of the concrete blocks, and then I fill those cores with concrete, which gives me a good backing for the rock work, good sturdy base for the joists. And then in the gap between the concrete and the stone, I laid some rebar and filled the gap with concrete and rubble. And then I kept working my way around the perimeter through the first 2 weeks of April. One of my many faults is that I have a tendency to get obsessed with a project and work on it single-mindedly without taking a break and remembering what it's really about. So that's why it's important to have a dog. If you have a dog, you have a natural break. So by mid-April, this is where we were. I had laid enough block for the foundation on the east side, part of the south side, and on the north side. Not for the rock walls that are going to go up from here, but for the foundation part. I'd let in a galvanized pipe, you see there in the lower part of the picture, in case I want to run some wires in from solar panels or something like that. And poured a curb out of concrete. I used sandset mix for this curb to keep the wooden part of the crawl space door frame above the water. It's draining toward the pipes. The crawl space door I'll be using is a ventilated crawl space as part of the ventilation system. I want to attach it to a wooden frame set into the wall rather than on the surface of the wall. So here's the crawl space door I plan to use. The cover pops off, and it has louvers, keep the rain out, and a screen to keep the vermin out. And this fin around the outside is designed to fit up flush on the outside of a crawl space wall, concrete block or brick, for example. In my case, I want to inset it, so I've built a wooden frame out of 4x4 posts, and I'll attach this fin to that frame. I needed a good, smooth, plumb opening to mount the wooden frame for the crawl space door, so I used formwork to help me get those walls true and smooth. And then I began laying block on the west side, which didn't have the big boulders, and I could lay a nice backing line of concrete block. I'd done some of this before when I built my house many years ago, but it took me a little while to get the hang of it again. But the concrete block sure moved faster than stone does. I'll still have 12 inches of stone to lay on the outside of this when I finish it. And here I'm just using a torpedo level to check the blocks as I go. When I had them all laid, I filled the cores with concrete and put some rebar every few feet to connect one course of block to the other and to reinforce the wall. And then when that was cured, I just continued with the rock work until I had built it up and filled the gap between the rock and the cinder block wall. By April 26, I had the foundation walls built. And I'd left the part where the walls will keep rising in stone a little ragged so that it wouldn't have a straight, unnatural looking line in the masonry. So this is a good place to stop for this video. Thank you for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you next time.